What do you think a wife needs a second phone for? That's right, not to get more work done or to be able to contact her husband. Not to order groceries or find out the weather. She needs it to secretly communicate with her lover. And I realized this through my own experience. And how did I handle that situation? Brilliantly. My plan was perfect and well thought out. And most importantly, I had a trusted ally. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to that fateful day. I've never been the kind of guy who snoops. Hell, I trusted Sarah. We'd been married 12 years, and even though things weren't perfect, I never thought I'd have to watch my back in my own home. My name's Hank Caldwell. I'm 42 years old, born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. I run my own auto shop, Caldwell's Custom Auto, just off Wilkinson Boulevard. Been working on cars since I was a teenager. My dad was a mechanic, and his dad before him. Grease runs in my veins. I drive a 2008 Ford F-150, nothing fancy, but it gets the job done. My wife, Sarah? She's always had a taste for the finer things. Drives a black Lexus RX 350, heated seats, leather interior, all the bells and whistles. She works as a real estate agent, and if you asked me before that day, I would have told you we had a good life. Now, I know better. It started like any other Saturday morning. Sarah had gone out for a client meeting at some fancy brunch spot uptown. I wasn't paying much attention, just glad to have the morning to myself. I grabbed a coffee from Amelie's French bakery, then stopped by the shop to check on a 72 Chevelle SS I was restoring. Around 11 a.m., I headed home. Sarah's Lexus was parked in the driveway, and I figured I'd do something nice, give it a quick clean. She was always too busy to do it herself, and I like taking care of things. I grabbed my detailing kit from the garage and got to work. I vacuumed the seats, wiped down the dash, cleaned the touchscreen. Everything was going fine, until I reached under the driver's seat. That's when I felt it. A small, hard object lodged in the floor mat. I pulled it out, and my stomach dropped. A second phone. It wasn't her usual iPhone 14 Pro with the floral case. This was a cheap burner phone, the kind you pick up at a gas station. The screen was cracked, and the back was scuffed like it had been tossed around. I hit the power button. The screen flickered to life. Sarah had never mentioned a second phone. Now, I'm not a paranoid guy, but let's be honest, there's no good reason for a married woman to have a burner phone. My hands felt clammy as I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the screen. I could already hear the excuses she'd give me if I asked her about it. Oh, it's for work. Oh, I needed a backup phone. Oh, my friend left it in my car. Bull. I opened the glove box and found an old charging cable, plugging the phone in. A minute later, the home screen lit up. No background picture. No fancy apps. Just messages and a call log. My gut told me to stop. I didn't. I tapped on messages. That's when my world fell apart. The first thing I saw was a message from a number with no name. Can't wait to see you tonight. I've missed you. The response? I've missed you too, babe. Same hotel? I scrolled up, my pulse hammering in my ears. The conversation went back months. Text after text, full of sweet nothings, longing, stolen moments. Some of the messages were downright sickening. Her telling him she wished she could wake up next to him every morning. Him telling her she was the best thing that ever happened to him. I felt like I was going to be sick. Then I saw it. A picture. I tapped on it. The screen filled with an image of Sarah, my wife, sitting in a dimly lit hotel room, wearing a silk robe, smiling at the camera. My hands started shaking. I backed out of the messages and went to the call log. There was one number she called almost every day. Sometimes late at night, sometimes early in the morning. An Atlanta area code. I copied the number and dialed it from my own phone. It rang twice. Then a voice answered. Hey, babe. What's up? I nearly dropped the phone. It was Jack Hamilton, my best friend. I hung up before he could realize it was me. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to crack my ribs. Jack. The guy I'd known since we were kids. We played Little League together, went to high school together, worked on cars together in my dad's garage. He was the best man at my wedding. And now? He was with my wife. I gripped the steering wheel, breathing hard. My hands curled into fists. This wasn't real. This had to be a mistake. But the phone in my lap said otherwise. There was no mistake. Jack and Sarah had been carrying on behind my back for months, maybe even longer. And I'd been too damn blind to see it. I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing, my whole body numb. The Carolina sun beat down on me, but I felt cold inside. Sarah's voice snapped me out of it. She was coming up the driveway, shopping bags in hand, looking like she didn't have a care in the world. I stuffed the burner phone into my pocket and took a deep breath. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I sat in my truck, gripping the steering wheel so hard it was about to come off. The burner phone lay on the seat beside me, its cracked screen glowing like a bomb waiting to go off. Sarah's texts to Jack. The hotel bookings. The little inside jokes they shared. All of it sat right there. Undeniable proof that my wife and my best friend had been sneaking around behind my back. I could have walked into the house right then, slammed the phone down on the counter, and watched her face crumble under the truth. But something in my gut told me to hold off. Not yet. I needed to talk to someone first. Someone who deserved to know the truth just as much as I did. Jack's wife, Emily Hamilton. I pulled out my own phone and scrolled through my contacts. Her name was there, but it had been a long time since I last called her. A year ago, maybe? Back when the four of us used to hang out, grab dinner, act like we were all living our nice little suburban lives. Guess that was all a lie. I hit call and put the phone to my ear. It rang twice before she picked up. Hank. Emily's voice was light, surprised. Hey, everything okay? I opened my mouth, but for a second, nothing came out. How the hell do you even say something like this? Hey, just calling to let you know that your husband is sneaking around with my wife. Hope you're having a great day. I took a breath, forcing the words out. Emily, I hesitated, my throat dry. I need to tell you something. And I need you to just listen for a second, all right? There was a pause. Then, her voice turned careful. Okay. I stared through the windshield, my pulse hammering. Sarah was inside the house, completely unaware that her world was about to collapse. I found a phone, I said finally. A second one. A burner. Emily was silent. I kept going. It was in Sarah's car. I checked the messages, Emily. She and Jack had been seeing each other. I could hear her sharp inhale through the receiver. Silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. For a second, I thought she might have hung up. I pulled the phone away, checked the screen. No, she was still there. I could hear her breathing, shaky and uneven. When she finally spoke, her voice was flat. I knew something was off. I exhaled, pressing a hand over my face. Emily's voice hardened. For months now, he's been different. Distant. Always working late. Always on his damn phone, texting like a teenager. I asked him about it once. She let out a bitter laugh. Just work, babe. That's what he said. Just work. I gritted my teeth. Sarah's been the same way. Emily scoffed. I can't believe I was so stupid. He used to be home for dinner every night. Then suddenly, he's working late twice a week? And the worst part? I believed him. She exhaled sharply. Guess we were both idiots, huh? I shook my head, staring out at the street. The world looked normal. The neighbors' kids were playing basketball. A mail truck rolled by. The sky was clear. But nothing felt normal anymore. You're not stupid, Emily. My voice came out rough. They are. She was quiet again. Then she said, voice sharp, Hank, let's destroy them together. A cold, steady feeling settled in my chest. Yeah, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. What do you have? She asked. I glanced down at the burner phone, its screen full of filth. Everything. Texts, call logs, hotel receipts. Jack even called me by accident. Thought I was her. My jaw clenched. Said, hey, babe, before I hung up. Emily let out a sharp breath. Jesus. I could hear movement on her end, maybe pacing, maybe just shifting in place. They've been careful, she muttered. I never saw anything outright. I wanted to believe I was imagining things. I almost laughed, cold and humorless. Yeah, well, we both see it now. Emily's voice dropped lower, quieter. Do you think they love each other? That question hit me harder than I expected. I thought about all the messages I read. The way Sarah talked to him. The way Jack told her he missed her. The way they laughed in their texts like teenagers sneaking around. I swallowed hard. I don't know. Maybe. Emily's breath hitched slightly. Then she cleared her throat. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. Doesn't matter, she said. Because by the time we're done, they won't have anything left. I nodded to myself. Damn right. She was silent for a moment. Then she asked, what's the plan? I exhaled, my pulse slowing, my thoughts steadying for the first time since I found that damn phone. We're gonna be smart about this, I said. No yelling. No knee-jerk reactions. We do this right. Emily hummed in agreement. Jack always thought he was the smartest guy in the room, she muttered. Let's prove him wrong. I clenched my jaw, nodding. Sarah and Jack thought they'd pulled this off. Thought we were too blind to see it. They had no idea what was coming. And when we were done, they'd wish they never met. Emily and I agreed on one thing right away. Before we made a move, we needed proof. Not just a few texts or some late-night calls. We needed something solid, something they couldn't weasel their way out of. Lucky for me, Emily wasn't just any woman. She worked in cybersecurity. And that meant Jack, in all his arrogance, had no idea what was coming. The day after our call, Emily invited me over to her place in Myers Park, one of those older, upscale neighborhoods in Charlotte. Jack had always loved flaunting their house, 2-story brick, big yard, expensive furniture that looked like no one was allowed to sit on it. Now, all of it felt hollow. Emily sat at her kitchen table, her laptop open, fingers flying over the keys. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail, her face cold and focused. A half-finished cup of coffee sat beside her, long forgotten. I set this up years ago, she murmured. Jack's always been careless with passwords. I used to joke that if someone wanted to drain our bank account, all they had to do was guess his childhood dog's name. She gave a humorless chuckle. I didn't think I'd ever need it for this. I leaned over to watch as she navigated Jack's cloud storage. The screen filled with hundreds of files, documents, receipts, emails, photos. Emily clicked on messages first. The thread with Sarah opened immediately. The latest text was from this morning. Jack, can't wait for tonight. I'll get the room ready. Sarah, same place? Jack, of course. Gotta keep tradition alive. Emily's fingers curled into a fist. She scrolled up, and it got worse. Months of messages. Some were short and teasing, some full of details that made my stomach turn. But it was the photos that made my hands clench into fists. One of Sarah and Jack together at a bar in Raleigh, tucked into a corner booth, her head on his shoulder. Another of Sarah in a hotel room, wearing nothing but an oversized shirt, one that wasn't mine. Emily clicked into Jack's email next. It didn't take long. There it was. A reservation confirmation from the Hilton in Raleigh for Valentine's Day. Son of a, Emily cut herself off, exhaling hard through her nose. I felt something inside me snap. I had been planning a trip for months, thought about taking Sarah to Asheville, maybe renting a cabin. Meanwhile, she was making other plans. I stared at the screen, jaw clenched. That's it. That's what we needed. Emily clicked a few buttons, downloading everything onto a hard drive. This is just the start, she muttered. We're not done yet. Later that night, after Sarah fell asleep, I grabbed my tool bag and headed outside to her Lexus RX 350. I wasn't a hacker like Emily, but I knew cars. And what I was about to do, I was damn good at it. I crouched down near the rear bumper, pulling out a GPS tracker I'd bought that morning at a spy shop in South End. It was small, about the size of a deck of cards, with a strong magnetic base. I reached under the frame, found a good spot near the axle, and secured it in place. This little device would ping her location to my phone every few minutes. If she was going anywhere she shouldn't be, I'd know. I dusted off my hands and stood up, staring at the house. The bedroom light was off. Sarah was probably sleeping peacefully, dreaming about the next time she could sneak off with Jack. I turned and walked back to my truck, my fist clenched. Over the next 3 days, the tracker did exactly what I expected. Monday night, Sarah told me she was meeting a client. The GPS told me she was parked outside a townhouse in Ballantyne. Jack's townhouse. Wednesday afternoon, Sarah claimed she had a showing in Huntersville. The GPS showed her at a Marriott near the airport for 3 hours. I kept everything, screenshots, timestamps, locations. Emily and I checked the tracker against Jack's calendar, and sure enough, his schedule matched up perfectly. But it was the recording that sent me over the edge. Emily called me late Thursday night, her voice tense. Hank, you need to hear this. She sent me an audio file. I hit play. Jack's voice came through clear as day. Once we're free, it'll finally be just us. My blood ran cold. Emily's voice was tight when she spoke. He recorded that as a voice memo. Saved it in his cloud. My guess? He planned on sending it later. I gripped my phone so hard I thought it might crack. Jack and Sarah weren't just having an affair. They were planning a future together. I exhaled slowly, forcing my anger into something sharper. Emily's voice came through the phone again, hard and determined. They want a new life together? She asked. She let out a breath. Let's make sure it starts in ruins. By the time Emily sent me that recording, I already knew what had to be done. I wasn't the kind of man to drag things out. I'd given Sarah 12 years of my life, and she threw it away. Jack. I'd known him since we were kids. And yet he looked me in the eye for months and played me for a fool. They thought they had it all figured out. Thought they could lie, cheat, and walk away clean. They had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I met Emily at a coffee shop in South Park, one of those fancy places with overpriced lattes and people in business suits working on laptops. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window, scrolling through her phone. A tall black coffee sat untouched in front of her. Her face was calm, collected, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. I slid into the seat across from her. "You talked to your lawyer?" She nodded, tapping her phone screen and flipping it around to show me a name. Nathaniel Rhodes, family law attorney, Asheville, North Carolina. "My cousin," she said. "One of the best divorce lawyers in North Carolina. I called him last night. Told him everything." She locked eyes with me. "He's ready." I nodded. "Good." Emily took a breath. "Hank, we aren't just ending our marriages. We're destroying them." I leaned forward. "That's the idea." I already had a lawyer lined up, Samuel Grayson, an old friend of my dad's. He'd handled my business contracts over the years, and I knew he'd have my back. I called him that morning, told him what was going on, and he didn't even hesitate. "You want to make sure she walks away with nothing?" he asked. "Not a damn thing," I said. "Then we'll do it right." Emily's cousin didn't waste time. By the next afternoon, the papers were drafted. Jack's assets were spread across multiple accounts, but Emily had access to everything. She had copies of his investment portfolios, retirement funds, real estate holdings, everything she needed to make sure he got cleaned out. As for Sarah, she had her name on our house, our savings, and a handful of credit cards she loved maxing out. But she'd contributed next to nothing. She worked as a real estate agent, but in the last few years, she'd barely sold a thing. I paid the mortgage. I paid the bills. And that meant she was leaving with nothing. When I sat down with Grayson in his uptown office, he had the paperwork ready. I flipped through the pages, reading over the details. Sarah wouldn't get the house. Sarah wouldn't get a dime of my business. Sarah wouldn't see a dollar from me after this divorce was final. I signed. Emily called me that night. "Jack's gonna lose half of everything," she said. "And I'm taking the house." I smirked. Beautiful. There was only one thing left to do. Divorce papers alone weren't enough. We weren't going to hand them over until the time was right. First, we needed to make sure that when Jack and Sarah found out, they would have nothing left to hold on to. This wasn't just a breakup. It was an execution. I sat at my desk in Caldwell's custom auto, staring at the list in front of me. It was simple. 3 things. Take back control of my finances. Refinance the house in my name only. Sell anything Sarah held dear. She had already taken what mattered most: trust, loyalty, and the life we built together. I wasn't about to let her walk away with a damn thing. First thing the next morning, I drove to Wells Fargo on Tryon Street. The branch manager, a guy named Keith, had helped me set up our joint accounts years ago. Friendly guy, always remembered my name. Today, I wasn't in the mood for small talk. Keith greeted me with a smile. "Morning, Hank. What can I do for you?" "I need to close my joint account with Sarah Caldwell." I slid my ID across the desk. Keith's smile faltered. "Everything okay? Just need to handle some things." He nodded and started clicking through his computer. After a few minutes, he frowned. "There's about $22,000 in here. Do you want to transfer it to a different account?" "Yeah, my personal account." His fingers hesitated on the keyboard. "Does Sarah know about this?" I leaned forward. "Keith, buddy, you're a smart man. Let's not make this complicated." That was all it took. A few clicks later, the account was drained. I left the bank with every cent moved into my own name. Sarah wouldn't realize it until the next time she tried to buy one of her overpriced lattes from Not Just Coffee in South End. I almost wished I could see her face when her card got declined. Next up was the house. Sarah's name was on the deed, but she never paid a dime toward the mortgage. Not once. It was all my money, my investment. I called my mortgage broker, Mike Talbot, over at First Citizens Bank. Mike was an old friend, used to bring his Mustang into my shop for upgrades. I met him at his office later that afternoon. He glanced up from his desk when I walked in. "Hank, what's up, man?" "Need to talk business, Mike." His face turned serious. "What's going on?" "I need Sarah's name off my mortgage." I slid the paperwork across his desk. Mike whistled. "That bad, huh?" I didn't say anything, just stared him down. He nodded and got to work. "All right, you've got the equity to refinance under just your name. We can push this through in a few days. Make it faster." Mike glanced at me, then back at his screen. "I'll see what I can do." By the time Sarah figured out she didn't own the house anymore, I'd already have the locks changed. Sarah had a taste for luxury. She never cared about my truck or the shop, but she loved her status symbols, designer handbags, jewelry, expensive clothes she barely wore. I started with her Louis Vuitton handbag. She carried it everywhere, acted like it was some kind of trophy. I listed it on Facebook Marketplace for half its value. Sold in less than an hour. Next went her diamond bracelet, a birthday gift from me 2 years ago. Pawned it off at Queen City Pawn for cash on the spot. Then, I looked at her Peloton bike, the one she used maybe twice before losing interest. I posted it online and sold it to a guy in Ballantyne the next day. One by one, everything she loved was gone. While I was handling Sarah, Emily was going after Jack. She called me that night, her voice cool and satisfied. Just moved $14,000 out of our joint investment account, she said. Jack's too dumb to notice until it's gone. I chuckled. Nice. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with our financial advisor to cash out what I can before the divorce gets messy, she continued. Jack keeps most of his money in stocks and mutual funds. He thinks that protects him. I smirked. And does it? Not when I take my half first. Jack had always bragged about his investments, loved telling us about his diversified portfolio, acting like he was some kind of Wall Street genius. Now, Emily was making sure he felt every loss. By the end of the week, it was all in motion. Sarah's money was gone. Sarah's name was off the house. Sarah's prized possessions were sold. Jack's investments were drained. Jack's accounts were split. Jack's financial safety net was gone. By the time they realized something was wrong, it would be too late. Sarah would check her bank account and see a big, fat zero. Jack would log into his portfolio and watch thousands vanish overnight. They wanted a new life together? Let's see how they like starting from nothing. The day had finally arrived. February 14th, Valentine's Day. Jack and Sarah thought they were getting away with it. Thought they were sneaking off for a romantic escape in Raleigh, completely unaware that Emily and I were just 2 doors down, waiting. Emily had booked our room under a fake name, Claire Thompson, 2 days prior. We checked in before they arrived, watching the lobby from a corner booth in the hotel bar. And sure enough, just before 6 p.m., they walked in. Jack, dressed sharp in a navy blue blazer and jeans, his usual cocky smirk on his face. Sarah, wearing a red dress that I'd bought for her last year, looking up at him like he hung the damn moon. The sight of them together, acting like a real couple, made my blood boil. Emily gripped her wine glass so hard I thought it might shatter. They look comfortable, she muttered, her voice cold. I exhaled through my nose. Not for long. Jack spoke briefly with the front desk clerk before taking a key card. Sarah slipped her arm through his, giggling like a high school girl as they headed toward the elevators. Emily and I gave them a 5-minute head start. Then, we followed. Room 1412. We stood outside the door. I could hear faint laughter inside, the sound of ice clinking in glasses. They were probably toasting to their little love affair, thinking they had pulled off the perfect betrayal. Emily looked at me. You ready? I nodded. She swiped the stolen key card, one we had bribed the maid for earlier, and the lock clicked open. I kicked the door in. Sarah's scream split the air as she scrambled to grab the bedsheets, pulling them up to her chest. Jack staggered backward, eyes wide, his face draining of color. Hank, he stammered, hands up like he could talk his way out of it. It's not what it looks like. I let out a cold laugh. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like. I reached into my jacket and tossed a manila envelope onto the bed, right between them. Happy Valentine's Day. Emily stepped forward, her heels clicking against the floor, and dropped her own envelope directly into Jack's lap. Her voice was stone cold. Sign it. Now. Sarah sat there, frozen, the color completely drained from her face. Jack stared down at the divorce papers, blinking like he couldn't understand what he was seeing. What? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. How did you? I crossed my arms. You really think you're smart enough to pull this off and not get caught? Sarah's lips trembled, but Jack was the first to snap out of it. He sat up, face twisting in anger. You set us up. Emily let out a mocking laugh. Oh, sweetie, she said, tilting her head. You set yourselves up. We just let you walk into it. Jack gritted his teeth, his hands tightening around the papers. He looked like he wanted to throw them. Then, his eyes shifted. To the nightstand. To a Hilton room key, one that wasn't his. Sarah followed his gaze. Her breath hitched. Her head snapped toward me and Emily, her face full of sudden realization. Emily just smirked. Yeah, she said, voice dripping with satisfaction. We had our own little celebration tonight. Jack's entire expression darkened. His shoulders tensed, and his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might break a tooth. You slept together? He spat, voice full of venom. I shrugged, barely suppressing a smirk. Seems fair, don't it? Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. No, you're lying. Emily gave her a sympathetic look. That's what you do, honey. We deal in the truth. Jack looked like he wanted to punch a hole in the wall. Sarah looked like she was about to burst into tears. I watched them, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks, satisfaction. They were finally feeling what we had felt. The rug being ripped out from under them. The world crashing down around them. That sick, sinking realization that their perfect little fantasy was falling apart. I turned toward Emily. We done here? She adjusted her coat. I still locked on Jack. Yeah, I think we are. Jack and Sarah just sat there, tangled in sheets, ruined, humiliated, exposed. And we walked out the door without another word. Jack always thought he was untouchable. For years, he walked through life like a man who had nothing to fear, like everything would always go his way. He had a high-powered job, a big house, and a wife who was smarter than he deserved. And yet, somehow, that wasn't enough for him. Now, he was about to lose it all. A week after the hotel ambush, Emily and I met at Rhodes & Associates, her cousin Nathaniel's law firm in Asheville. His office had a panoramic view of the Blue Ridge Mountains, but I wasn't here for the scenery. I was here to watch Jack get destroyed. Jack, of course, hired his own lawyer, some expensive, arrogant guy out of Raleigh. Thought money could save him. It couldn't. Nathaniel was 3 steps ahead the whole time. Mr. Hamilton, Nathaniel said, flipping through the file, we have documented evidence of your extramarital affair, including call logs, financial transactions, and hotel records. Your wife, my client, has been nothing but loyal to you. Meanwhile, we slid a stack of printed-out text messages across the table, have spent the last year sneaking around like a college kid cheating on a final exam. Jack sat there, jaw clenched, saying nothing. His lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Hamilton is willing to discuss a more favorable. Oh, he'll discuss something all right, Nathaniel interrupted smoothly. Here's what's happening. Emily is getting the house. She's getting half of your business. And she's keeping every asset she is legally entitled to. Jack's face turned red. The house, he snapped. The one I paid for? Nathaniel tilted his head. Did you, though? Or was it the joint income from your marriage that paid for it? Jack's lawyer muttered something under his breath, but Jack was unraveling. I built my firm from nothing, he hissed. Nathaniel just smiled. And now you get to watch someone else take half of it. Jack shoved his chair back so hard it nearly tipped over. This is a damn joke. Nathaniel folded his hands. Feel free to take it to court. But I promise you, by the time we're done, you'll wish you had just signed the papers. Emily never said a word through the whole meeting. She just watched Jack with cold, calculated detachment, like he was a stranger. By the time he stormed out, she turned to me and said, that was satisfying. Yeah, it was. The legal battle wasn't the only thing Jack had to worry about. The morning after the confrontation, word started spreading. Jack's firm, Hamilton & Associates, was known for family law, divorce cases, custody battles, marital disputes. And now? Their senior partner had just been exposed as a lying, cheating hypocrite. By the end of the week, his name was removed from the company website. By the end of the month, he was fired. The official reason? Conduct unbecoming of a managing partner. The real reason? No one wanted to hire a divorce attorney who couldn't keep his own marriage together. Jack went down in flames, and I enjoyed every second of it. Sarah, on the other hand, tried to sweet-talk her way out of this. I expected her to fight dirty like Jack. To argue, to lie, to make excuses. Instead, she played the victim. 1 week after the confrontation, she showed up at my shop, Caldwell's Custom Auto, just as I was closing up for the night. She was standing by my truck, arms crossed over her chest, looking like she was ready to beg. I stopped a few feet away, pulling off my gloves. What do you want, Sarah? Her eyes welled with tears. Hank, please, we need to talk. There's nothing to talk about. She took a shaky breath. I made a mistake. I let out a sharp laugh. A mistake? No, a mistake is forgetting to turn off the oven. A mistake is putting the wrong gas in your car. I took a step forward, looking her dead in the eyes. I gestured between us. This was a choice. Sarah swallowed hard, tears spilling down her face. I was stupid, Hank. I didn't let her finish. I stepped around her, unlocked my truck, and opened the driver's side door. Sarah reached for my arm. Hank, please. I pulled back. No. Her lower lip trembled. You don't mean that. I know you still love me. I exhaled, staring at her for a long second. You know what, Sarah? I said, my voice quiet. I did. I climbed into my truck and shut the door in her face. The divorce moved fast. Sarah didn't get a dime from me. Jack lost half his business, his job, and his reputation. By the time the dust settled, they had nothing left. Sarah had to move out of our house and rent an apartment in a cheap complex on the other side of town. Jack had to sell his Audi Q7 just to cover legal fees. I imagined them, sitting together in some rundown diner, staring at each other across the table, both realizing how badly they had screwed up. They wanted a new life together. They got it. Alone. Ruined. And broken. For the first few weeks after the divorce was finalized, Emily and I only talked when we needed to. Mostly legal things. Finalizing paperwork, splitting up the last of the assets, making sure Jack and Sarah didn't try to pull any last-minute stunts. Every conversation was short, to the point, and focused on cleaning up the mess they left behind. But then something happened. One night, Emily called me, not about lawyers or paperwork, but about nothing in particular. Hey, she said, her voice softer than usual. You doing all right? It caught me off guard. No one had asked me that yet. People wanted details about the drama, about the fallout. But no one had just asked how I was holding up. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. Yeah, I muttered. I think so. She sighed. Yeah, me too. For a few moments, neither of us spoke. There was no rush to end the call. No awkwardness. Just silence that somehow felt comfortable. And that's how it started. At first, we'd talk every few days. Then every day. Some nights, she'd call just to vent. About work. About some new frustrating detail in her life. Some nights, I'd call her, just needing to hear a voice that understood what I'd been through. We never talked about Jack and Sarah. That part of our lives was over. Instead, we talked about everything else. One afternoon in early September, Emily sent me a text out of nowhere. Emily, ever been to the Antler and Oak Whiskey Bar in Asheville? Me, can't say I have. Why? Emily, come have a drink with me tonight. I stared at my phone for a long moment before I typed back. Me, see you at 7. Asheville was a 2-hour drive from Charlotte, but I didn't mind. I took my Dodge Ram up the winding mountain roads, the city lights fading behind me, replaced by the endless stretch of blue peaks and rolling fog. By the time I pulled into the parking lot, the sun had already started to set, washing the skyline in deep oranges and purples. The Antler and Oak was a small place tucked off Biltmore Avenue, known for its quiet atmosphere and strong drinks. The kind of place where people came to get lost in conversation. Emily was already inside, sitting at the bar with a glass of bourbon in her hand, the rim of it reflecting the warm glow of the low-hanging lights. She looked up as I walked in, a slow smirk spreading across her lips. Didn't think you'd actually show. I slid onto the stool beside her. Figured you'd call me a coward if I didn't. She raised her glass in a mock toast. You would have deserved it. The bartender came over, a stocky guy with salt and pepper hair and a worn-out flannel. What'll you have? Same as her, I said, nodding toward Emily's drink. He poured 2 fingers of bourbon, the amber liquid settling in the glass like fire. I took a slow sip, letting it burn down my throat. For a while, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Instead, we just sat there, drinking in the quiet, the company, the feeling of something shifting between us. After a moment, Emily set her glass down and turned toward me, her dark eyes full of something I couldn't quite place. Did you ever think, she murmured, that all of this was meant to happen? I met her gaze, rolling the question over in my head. Months ago, I would have said no. I would have said that what happened was a disaster, that Jack and Sarah had stolen years of our lives, that everything had been a waste. But sitting here now, I realized something. Jack and Sarah may have shattered us, but somehow, Emily and I had built something new from the pieces. I lifted my glass, tilting it slightly toward her. Yeah, I said finally, meeting her eyes. I think now? She smiled. A real one this time. We clinked our glasses together, the sound ringing through the dimly lit bar, the first real toast of a new beginning. We left the past behind that night, and walked forward into something neither of us had seen coming. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Jack and Sarah got what they deserved? Or was the revenge too harsh? If you like the story, subscribe to the channel and give us a like.